Hey, how the fuck are you? This is Zaza, and basically I want to make a Fire Mage guide for all you guys out there. Just a little disclaimer before we begin. I'm not claiming I am a master of this game. I haven't played it as long as a lot of other people have, but I have had some moderate success rating as a Fire Mage, and I wanted to just kind of impart some of that knowledge. I'm sure a lot of you could teach me a thing or two, so I'm not saying this is the end-all be-all, just a fun, friendly guide to Fire Mage. Before we begin, just kind of wanted to show my credentials, as minor as they may be. You might say, why the fuck are you making a Fire Mage guide? What do you know? Well, I wanted to just kind of point out, not to brag, but I'm item level 5.22. My guild is active. I play as Abril in the guild slightly modified on the Windrunner US server. We are 12 out of 12. Rating. We just flash the badge. Where is it? No, it's a Feast Strength. There we go. Ahead of the curve. Lei Shen. We're in patch 5.2. Today is May the 10th. And we have defeated Lei Shen in normal, so we're 12 out of 12. But I just wanted to kind of show that I do have some experience. I'm not just pulling this right out of my ass, basically. So what I'm going to do is break the guide down into chapters and have some annotations so that you can skip around if you want. And I'm not going to add a lot of fluff. This intro is going to be as fluffy as it gets. I know a lot of guides out there, you click on it, it's like 35 minutes long. That's not what this is going to be like. So I did just want to get the ball rolling. Alright, and before I move on to Chapter 2, I did also want to point out this guide is going to be good for 5.3 at this point. Reason being, the only thing that may really change for Fire Mages is the AoE rotation, since at this point Arcane Explosion is getting a buff, as is Flame Strike. A couple other things, but single target rotation is going to be relatively untouched. So that shit being said, we're moving on to Chapter 2. Chapter 2, we're going to talk about gear, stats, gems, trinkets, profession a little bit. We'll touch on that. So basically, as far as gear goes, you're going to want to amass as much crit as you can. Crit is the most important stat for a Fire Mage. There is no debate on that. Crit is extremely important because that's how you get your procs. The more procs you get, the more pyroblasts you can use. Pyroblast is going to be your best damage, really, in most fights. So, you're going to want to get a lot of crit. That being said, there is a threshold where you're not going to want to play Fire Mage until you have enough gear to get a certain crit chance. If you're just starting Mists of Pandaria, I do recommend starting off with a Frost Mage until you can get closer to maybe 5.2 item level, and it scales extremely well. The higher your item level, the more crit you amass, the better off you're going to be. As far as gems go, the three different gem types you're going to want to look for. You're going to want to use a Smooth Sun's Radiance, which is the yellow gem. That's going to give you 320 crit in any yellow slots. As far as red, you want to use a Potent Vermilion Onyx, which is 80 intellect and 160 crit chance. And then for the blues, you're going to want to use a, what's it called? A Piercing Wild Jade. Gives you 160 crit and 160 hit. I have seen some Fire Mages stack all Smooth Sun's Radiance, completely ignoring the set bonuses. At this point, I don't recommend that. I think the set bonuses are a bit better in most cases, so I would just go with this color matching. As far as trinkets go, there's a lot of discussion about mage trinkets for tier 15. Personally, I use Wuxulei's Final Choice. It's fantastic, has a shit ton of hit on it, and you can reforge that into crit as I did. You get a lot of crit from that. This does proc very often, and it's very powerful. Basically, it scales. You gain intellect every 2 seconds, and it stacks for 20 seconds. You get a ton of intellect from this trinket. Absolutely. The next one is Chai's Essence of Brilliance. It is a huge crit benefit As you can see, the base stat on it is crit. And when your spells deal critical damage, which yours are going to do very often, you have a chance to gain a very large amount of intellect for 10 seconds. So I would say that these two trinkets are your best options. As far as profession goes, most professions kind of yield a similar DPS benefit. Personally, I went with enchanting and tailoring. You get the cheap leg armor. You get a back enchant, which is very good. That gives you a lot of intellect that procs. And with enchanting, you can enchant your rings with some intellect, which is good. So that's what I use. That's all for Chapter 2. We're going to be moving on to builds, talents, glyphs next. Chapter 3, we're going to talk about talents and glyphs quickly. Basically, let's go through the list here. Presence of Mind should be used every encounter. It gives you an instant cast Pyroblast. It's very important to your rotation. You can do it every 1.5 minutes. So, very important, Presence of Mind, use it. The only alternative, I use Blazing Speed on Iron Quan sometimes. It helps your survivability during the tornado phase. You get Blink and Blazing Speed to basically make a quick run of it. Presence of Mind is going to give you better damage. As far as in the level 30 ones, we're going to look at these all. Now, Temporal Shield is good only if you plan on using it. For example, Megara, you can use it during Rampage. Most of the time, though, I would recommend Ice Barrier. It gives you a shield that you have to use, so it does take a global cooldown. But it prevents a lot of damage. It's very helpful. Flame Glow, I have to say, is garbage. It's more of a something for casuals that want a passive way of mitigating damage and don't want to take the time to use Ice Barrier, but overall I find Flame Glow pretty useless. The 45 talents are mostly used for PvP. I don't get a lot of use out of any of these, really. 60, Greater Invisibility. As you see here, I've Cauterize selected, but Greater Invisibility is the best of them because it reduces your damage taken by 90% for 20 seconds. Any action you do is going to take you out of the invisibility, but it also, for 3 seconds after, keeps that 90% damage reduction up. So if you plan on taking some damage, or there's damage that coming that will otherwise kill you, Greater Invisibility is a better option. What Cauterize does is it's a passive. Basically, if you die, you go back to 50% health, and then you burn down to 10%. So I've survived many encounters with Cauterize. I'm sure a lot of mages will agree. Excellent talent. So it's really your pick here. I would recommend, if you want to be a top player, Greater Invisibility is best. Nether Tempest for the bomb. Only option. Living Bomb's not good. It's going to be buffed in 5.3. So this may change in 5.3. Frost Bomb, no. The only time Frost Bomb's good maybe is Tordos when you're fighting bats. But I would say Nether Tempest is best in every situation. Does a lot of damage. And then as far as your 90 talent, I would say Invocation is definitely the best one out of these. Incanter's Ward, when the patch first came out, a lot of people were saying that it's not as bad as you might think. I do think it's as bad as you might think. I don't like Incanter's Ward. Rune of Power just doesn't provide a solid benefit compared to Invocation, which gives you the same exact increased spell damage. So, of course, you're going to want to keep this up at all times, and we'll get into that in Chapter 5, which is rotation. For glyphs, you're going to want to use Glyph of Combustion. It doubles the duration and cooldown of combustion. This is excellent. You have to worry about your combustion less. You get a longer duration out of it. Inferno Blast is key. This is absolutely key. Basically, you have 3 dots. Your Pyroblast has a dot to it, Ignite is a dot, and Combustion is a dot. This will spread it to an additional target. So every time you use Inferno Blast, it spreads it to 3 targets nearby. So if you use Inferno Blast on a target that has the dots, spreads them. This spreads it to an additional target. You can't go wrong there. It's a sheer DPS increase. Glyph of Cone of Cold is excellent as well. Pretty much triples the damage of Cone of Cold. 200% increase. This is excellent. It's just better damage against, when you have a lot of adds at the same time. Alternatively, if you're doing a single target fight, you can take Cone of Cold out and put in Glyph of Evocation, which basically gives you 10% health. every time you evocate, which is pretty handy. Good survivability there. So I sub them out from time to time. As far as your minor glyphs go, not a lot of importance here. I use mirror image. Basically just makes my mirror images shoot fire instead of frost. Rapid teleportation is cool because when you teleport, you get a run speed burst when you come out of the teleportation. Now this one's important, I think. Glyph of Momentum allows you to blink in the direction that you're running toward. So blink only work forward without this glyph. I highly recommend Glyph of Momentum so that you can choose which direction you want to blink to, either backwards, left, right, diagonal, whatever. But that sums it up for Chapter 3, and we're going to move on to Chapter 4, which is the opening. I was going to talk about macros later. In fact, that's Chapter 6. But I did have to show you this particular macro since it is a part of the opening. Chapter 4 is about opening and raid fights. So I wanted to show you this macro and what it does. This macro does Alter Time, Presence of Mind. It uses a Potion of Jade Serpent if it's available. And it also casts a Pyroblast, which is very important. I just wanted to show you this right before we begin so that you know what I'm doing when I do the opening, as it is a part of it. So what you want to do first is you want to make sure that you have your armor up. Molten Armor is the only choice. It gives you a crit buff. And you want to have your Arcane Brilliance up, of course. I'm sure the rest of your raid will let you know if you don't have it. And then you want to make sure you're using a Flask of the Warm Sun. That is the flask for you, and have plenty of pots. Here's the opening. You want to evocate to start. 4 seconds mirror image. 3 seconds into the countdown pot and start casting a Pyroblast. Once that's cast, Nether Tempest immediately, followed up by a Fireball until you have a Heating Up and Pyroblast proc. What you're going to do is use your macro once that ends. Get as many Pyroblasts as you can. And use Combustion after the Alter Time is over. Now, that obviously went very quickly. It's pretty complicated, really. It does take some practice to get down. So what I am going to do is I'm going to slow it down and put some text instruction up and show you exactly what I did and kind of explain why as it's going. Here's a more slowed down explanation. You want to use Evocation with 8 seconds remaining in the countdown, around. You want to mirror image 4 seconds left, and then use your pot and begin casting a Pyroblast right after that. As that's casting, get ready to use another Tempest, and then start casting your first Fireball. Here's where it gets tricky. You Fireball until you have Heating Up and Pyroblast at the same time. Just like that. Then you use the macro right as this next Fireball goes off so they hit at the same time. Pyroblast till you have no more, and then end Alter Time yourself by using it again. After Alter Time is over, you consume all of your natural Pyroblasts, meaning the ones that are highlighted in red on your UI. That's your Pyroblast made naturally. You use Combustion after your last natural Pyroblast, and then you can use your Presence of Mind Pyroblast. The one that you have loaded that is from Presence of Mind, not the one that's highlighted in the red box. Here's a little reasoning behind it. You want to have the natural Pyroblast consumed because they are stronger than one that's cast with Presence of Mind. Your Combustion's damage is going to be based on your last 2 hits, so you want them to be the strongest Pyroblasts that they can be. You do this after Alter Time is consumed because the Mage 2 piece for tier 15 gives you some extra damage. It increases 3 stats by 1800, Haste, Mastery, and Crit. So that's why you want to do it that way, to absolutely maximize your opener. Next up, we're going to talk about rotation. Now this is obviously extremely important. We did cover opener, so now we're going to see what we do for the rest of the fight. Now, I followed a bad example until recently. I came across a fantastic guide on Icy Veins that was updated by Vladdy or Lady from Method, and really corrected the way that I approach my rotation. It's really simple, and I'll show you the bad way first, and then the way that I feel you're supposed to do the rotation. When I say bad example, there's really only a minor difference, and that is just shooting a pyroblast whenever you have one. Basically firing fireball until you get heating up, and then using Inferno Blast, and then casting pyroblast immediately. That's what I used to do, and I no longer agree with that way of doing rotation. Here's what you should do for a proper Fire Mage rotation. You want to put Nether Tempest up. Keep it up at all times. Do not let it fall off. It's important. Nether Tempest does a lot of damage. You want to cast Fireball until you get a heating up proc. When heating up procs, you want to use Inferno Blast to turn it into a Pyroblast proc. And you want to continue casting Fireball until you get another heating up proc. This is when it is okay to use a Pyroblast. So in review, keep Nether Tempest up at all times. You can't stress that enough. Cast Fireball until you get a heating up proc. That's when the lines are small next to your character. Use Inferno Blast to achieve a Pyroblast proc. That's when your lines are big. The fire lines next to you are big. Continue casting Fireball until you get another heating up proc. So you should have both sets of fire lines surrounding you. And then only cast Pyroblast if you have both of these up. That way you hopefully will crit when you hit the enemy with the Fireball and Pyroblast at the same time, achieving another Pyroblast. The reason I support this is that it keeps Inferno Blast more available. Using the bad example method, your Inferno Blast is going to be down. You're going to be getting some procs when you don't have Inferno Blast ready to go. So that is going to make your DPS suffer. I'm not going to spend a hell of a lot of time on multiple target rotation. Basically, one simple rule is keep Nether Tempest up on as many targets as you can. What you also want to do is do a single target rotation on one of them while Nether Tempest is ticking away until you achieve a Pyroblast, and you want to hit as many of the targets as you can with a Pyroblast to place the Pyroblast dot on them. So that way you're just having as many dots as possible. So again, Nether Tempest all the targets you can, Pyroblast as many as you can. Now if you have some adds, say in Throne of Thunder, that have a low amount of health, bats, or there's a whole bunch of adds at once, what I recommend doing is Cone of Cold, of course glyphed, and you also want to just spam Arcane Explosion until Cone of Cold comes back. This will probably change in 5.3, I speculate, because of the changes to Flame Strike, and well, Arcane Explosion might stick around since it's getting buffed, but yep, it's that simple. Now this last segment, which I title Add-ons, etc., is very opinionated. Everybody has really their own style and the way that they like their UI to look and add-ons that they like to use. I did want to just touch on the macro one more time and show you what it looks like. So here it is right there. Consumes a pot. If available, use Presence of Mind, Alter Time, and Pyroblast. I also have a practice one, which I was using in the vid, that just removed the potion part, because I don't want to waste pots. Now, as far as add-ons go, I use one called Combustion Helper, which I find very helpful. It does two things for me. One is it keeps track of my bomb. Well, another add-on I use is actually covering that up. This is called Tell Me When. Basically, that helps me keep track of my evocation, so when it runs out, and I'm sure you'll see it while I'm recording, it gives me a big loud warning and shakes and says that I need to recast that. So going back to Combustion Helper, right here it keeps track of my Nether Tempest, so I don't have to keep my attention away from the center of my screen. Of course, you want your eyes to be here, so that you can avoid damage and not die. But it's great while you're doing your rotation, watching your pyroblast procs. You have your bomb tick here, and you know when to recast it. Now the next thing is a part of Combustion Helper is that down here it will actually tell you what your tick would be using combustion. So that way you can try to maximize the best combustion tick that you can. I find that very helpful. So again, that's Combustion Helper. Here, and see, as you can see, if I enter combat and I don't have evocation up, it alerts me right away and flashes red, and that's fairly simple to set up too. And then once I use evocation, it goes away. You might have also seen this flashing here. That's an add-on I use called Bitten Spell Flash. It's a great way to learn a class because they have a rotation kind of built in. It tells you what spells to use next. Mainly I still have it out of habit. I really don't pay attention to it much because I really don't keep my eyes down there. But one thing it does, it also serves as a way of showing me when evocation is about to fall off, because it will flash that as well. But that's about it. I don't really use much else. But I hope you guys enjoyed the vid, maybe learned something, help improve your game. I did want to give a special thanks to Icy Veins and Bladdy or Blady from Method for updating the guides this April. It really helped change my game around. And I hope to see you out there. This is Azza signing off. And peace.